the fact that you decided to go there, Judith, and Judith is a Unity minister, um, and we knew her before. She was attending our Zooms before she went there, and now she's in Tel Aviv, um, making her way back to the States. She arrived at the Tent of Nations on Monday, May 27th. She traveled the entire length of Israel by train to the West Bank of Palestine. And she's met a lot of people. I'm not going to take a lot of time talking about you so that you can talk about you and why, Judith. Thank you so much for agree. We were going to have Judith, but I wanted to make sure we got her before she came back. Um, so yeah, take it away, Judith.
Thank you. Thank you, David. Your message and book and community has ministered to me since I first heard of you from Scott and Barbara when I was in Santa Maria um, during COVID, and I could not connect with you very often, but I had one Sunday off a month. So I got to connect with you a few times while I was there. And I feel honored, to be talking to all of you. I can honestly say that Palestine was not a place, and Israel was not a place that I was motivated to go to ever in my life until I met Mazen and Jesse Kumsier. A little over a year and a half ago, they came through the Sierra Club to the church I was serving in Port Richey, Florida. And I was so taken by Mazen's story.
Oops, you got muted. Oh, and it's muted again.
How's that?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. So I was deeply touched by Mazen's story. He was born in Beth Sahor, the Shepherd's Field, and he just basically told his story of the 15 intifadas. So Mazen's writing a book right now on activism, and he believes that he can tell us about 15 uprisings, and I have learned so much from him. And I wanted to, when I heard him and Jesse talk about their decision to retire and use all their money to go and help the Palestinian people and to also save the land there, because the Fertile Crescent is one of the most biologically diverse places on the planet. And he is a biologist, and he shared with me all this information about the diversity there. And I had this thought that I wanted to give him a new beatitude, him and Jesse. Blessed are those who stand for the diversity of the people and the plants and the animals and the land, for they shall inherit the future. And so I said, I'm going to come and volunteer with you when I retire. And so I retired after 30 years of serving ministry last March on my 68th birthday. And I started to make plans to go to Palestine and did a really deep dive into Israel's history and the history of the Palestinian struggle for the last year. I know some of you have probably been involved in that for many, many years. I was not. It wasn't on my radar. It wasn't something that I knew anything about. And I feel so blessed at this time in my life to have been in Palestine and to have experienced what it is to live in occupation, because I never have had any experience with that. This last 2 weeks has been the most difficult for me, because it seems that everything is escalating right now. So let me give you a few just statistics. As Israel continued to relentlessly bomb Palestinians in Gaza, over 140 people were killed just last weekend, just in the weekend. And countless people are still being imprisoned, and I I would say kidnapped from their homes without charges, and put into these very severe imprisonments. The day after October 7th, 9,000 people were imprisoned, and many of them were young people. Israel is one of the only places that has children in prison without their parents even being notified, without having any real reason or any kind of way of finding out or getting a lawyer, having a phone call, those things that we kind of consider to be normal. So there's tens of thousands of men, women, and children in jail in Israeli incredibly harsh prisons. Also, in the past couple of weeks, 8 out of 10 of the United Nations schools in the West Bank have been bombed for unknown reasons, just indiscriminate bombings. There was a tent massacre that was reminiscent of Wounded Knee, where people were burned alive. And the little town of Al Walaja, where the most ancient tree, estimated to be 4,000 years old, this giant olive tree, this little town where my friends Mazen and 50 of his friends went to jail many times 20 years ago to protect that town and protect that olive tree from being bulldozed. That little town last week had 5 home demolitions. And if that weren't enough, 5 more journalists were killed, making it a total of 158 journalists that have been killed in 9 months, which is more than all other countries in the world in the last 5 years. And then a stunning and highly researched opinion of the International Criminal Court of Justice, the highest global legal authority. How many of you know what I'm talking about? Made this unexpected, amazing, and clear decision, highly researched opinion that concluded that all activities carried out by Israel as the occupying power in the occupied areas of the Golan Heights, Gaza, West Bank, including Jerusalem, are illegal. They violate international law and they must be dismantled and reparations made. And these illegal activities are the ones I just shared: the bulldozing of homes, the illegal settlements, these demolitions, the wall, the economic deprivation, starvation, ethnic cleansing. The court ruled that international law for this decades-long occupation declared it must end. And the Palestinian people have the right to return, that the settlers must leave, and that the Palestinian people must have reparations for the harms that have been done to them. So I wanted to do the happy dance. I was listening to this, I kept listening to it. I checked to see if it was fake news. I wanted to do the happy dance, to break open the champagne and celebrate this remarkable moment. Yet another part of me was so afraid that this insane government of Israel might just blow us all up before the party begins. And in fact, right after that stunning indictment, Israel bombed Gaza, Yemen, and Lebanon. So here I am in Tel Aviv, bearing witness to this unpredictable moment. And a few days ago, the city was bombed by Yemen. And my experience, as David said, of being here began in Tel Aviv at a Buddhist center, a very beautiful sangha that kind of took me in and gave me some space to travel as far north as possible in Israel to visit some Buddhist Sufi friends that had started a place called Khalil Village, an eco village, almost to Lebanon. And I've known Stephen for over 40 years, and he and his Israeli wife and about 6 other people started an eco village. And then now there's 1,400 people living there, and lots of children, and they're very diverse culturally and religiously and spiritually. And it was a beautiful way to start my trip, to see what was possible, how people can live close to the land, multiculturally, off the grid even. They're not really receiving a lot of the amenities that many Israeli people do here. And then I traveled, as David said, the whole length of Israel to Palestine and spent the whole rest of my time in Bethlehem. I didn't leave. It's very difficult to leave and to go through checkpoints, and it's dangerous. And there was lots of violence happening, and there aren't very many volunteers here at all. And so I was extremely busy, and I felt that I needed to be where I was, being of service where I was. And so I was at the Tent of Nations on my days off from the Palestine Institute. And I first actually started at the Tent of Nations, which is a huge organic farm, one of the largest pieces of land left in this area. And they had been attacked several times while I was there. And then I went to the Palestine Institute to bear witness. That is the only way I can frame it. I think those of you that come from this tradition understand that to bear witness is to just act in solidarity with those who are suffering, and to realize that we're one, by being together and actually living the life of the people in Palestine, I became Palestinian, and I felt absolutely one with, with the suffering. I can't express it any other way except that, there is this sense with which when we farm together and when we cook together and when we live together and when we suffer together these horrifying acts of violence every single day, that side by side, we're intentionally planting seeds for one people, one human family. With everything that we do, our intention is for the violence to end and for us to have a place all over the world where there isn't this constant barrage of might makes right and this intangible almost feeling that, we're on the precipice of something really horrible and really wonderful, and we don't know which way it's going to go. And so you just deal, and it's not easy, one day at a time with the secondary trauma that's all around you, and hope that whatever it is that I can do is alleviating in some way some of that suffering. I want to share a couple of experiences that made me realize just how traumatizing it is to be a Palestinian, and to have suffered through this occupation. And, it's been 76 years. So it's many generations, and multi-generational trauma is very insidious. And so a scientist, for example, that was working at the Institute, and I were working in a hyena cage together. And the people who had made this cage had actually put toxic substances, I don't know why, um, in these places where the hyenas sleep, these big boxes. They put asbestos in there, like insulation. And so I wanted that out of there because the hyenas were, playing with it, and I was finding pieces of it everywhere. And I thought, this can't be good. And so I said, you should put gloves on for this because it's really, really poisonous. It can get into your skin. And he said, why should I care when they're putting these in our houses and they're trying to kill us every day? And I just realized that that is under the surface for a lot of people. That kind of feeling, like some of my friends would say I should just go kill myself and get it over with. I mean, I don't think they really meant it, but there was some level at which, after all of these years of persecution and death, after watching so many people be killed, after so much violence, you really feel like, just shoot me, and put me out of my misery. And so being a person who loves others and who can care about you caring about yourself, I felt that was, for me, the one thing that I could do, is to say to people all the time and to myself, caring about you is a sign that they aren't winning. And you and I loving each other And you and I loving an animal like I, or helping a fox to live or planting seeds for native plants is just one small way that we can say, yeah, maybe they can kill our bodies, but they will never kill our spirit. And so I'm not going to kill myself and get it over with. And I'm not going to listen to you say that either. Right? I am going to endure. I am going to one moment, one breath, one day at a time, have faith that there's a far greater thing going on here than I can currently see. And that in every waking moment, my prayer for all of us is that we find our peace of making this peace possible for Palestinians, for people in the Sudan, for people all over this world who are suffering because of our country and many other countries' greed and addiction to power and these ideas that Mike makes right and these amazing, completely ridiculous thoughts that because I discovered something, this doctrine of discovery, and I want it and its resources, that if I can, I will get it, regardless of who was there before me. That arrogant, colonial, racist mentality that is still in the human psyche. So those of us who are not of that, as Jesus was certainly not of that, he was the first, I think, outspoken revolutionary social activist that preached to everybody and left nobody out of his circle of love. And so I think for me, that is the heart of why I went to Palestine, that I couldn't do that for my native elders that I love because I wasn't alive then. And I didn't do it for South Africa. I was young and inexperienced, but maybe I could do something now because this is happening in real time, right? Right before our eyes. And so I went. And I'd just like to open it up to your questions because I am in this really weird space of processing almost 30 days of this experience. And I am in Tel Aviv, awaiting coming back. So I'm happy to answer any questions anybody has.
I have a question about I've heard in the past Israelis say that they have purchased the land from the Palestinians. And then I've heard that sometimes Palestinians take it back and Israelis have paid for it 2 or 3 times. Is that baloney or what's going on with that?
I think that it may be true in some instances that land was purchased. I know that one of the rules of the Eco Village, Khalil Village, was that they had to purchase land. And there are Palestinians that live there and have for many generations, and there's Druze that live there for many generations. And then there are others that are from other countries that purchase land from people who wanted to live other places. So I think that could be true, but I think it is not generally the case. The illegal settlements in the West Bank were certainly not purchased, and they there were 750,000 people that were forced out of their land and homes in 1948. So, and every year since then, there have been hundreds and thousands of these settlements that people really just go in and either bulldoze them, or they are armed and force people to leave and move into their homes. They're not purchased.
Bridget, where is your source of information that told you that? I'm curious.
You know, I don't remember if I read it or talked to somebody. It was some time ago, and before, you know, everything was starting now. And I remember thinking, well, something about this doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Well, I would also point, oh, sorry.
So,
Judith, go ahead.
No,
well,
I know that there's
that's
still
why I
selling
asked the question,
property
because something still
illegally.
doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean,
keep in mind in this country, you know what? The indigenous people here, the Native Americans, I guarantee you people have paid for stolen land. So there's that too. So that's why I want to know your source.
I feel people now are paying other people who didn't originally own the land either.
Right.
I remember as a teenager, I remember thinking, how can anybody pay for land? Like,
Yeah.
who
Well,
has the right to take money for land?
Right.
That whole concept never made any sense to me. I'm sure I'm the only one in the whole universe, but I'm like, how can you pay for land? Whose
So
land? Whose land?
I am currently paying for stolen land, but I see Barbara and Lisa, you have some people lined up waiting, but maybe you want to go ahead and launch into conversation.
Why don't we go ahead and let people point out things, because they'll probably, I'm sorry about that, you guys. There was just so much going on there. I see Bonnie and David. Yeah, so I don't know. I think she might be next. She's the first one I saw. So I apologize if that's out of order.
I'm sorry, me, Bonnie?
Go ahead.
Okay. Honey, I have a question. You said a minute ago that this new law or new ordinance, that was ordained, everybody should get their own place back. How's that going to be enforced?
yeah, that's the question, because they don't have a way in place for the world court, which is the highest court of the world, to implement, this legal realization. So I think it's going to take a while for us to figure it out, and Israel is not buying it, and whether or not the United States will support it. I mean, there could be sanctions. They have done different things, there could be standing armies, that go in and implement this. But it remains to be seen. It'll go to the United Nations Security Council. There's also the ruling on genocide that's going to be coming up soon, and the indictments of war criminals. So a lot of this remains to be seen, and it does feel like we're at a pivotal moment where, a country that has nuclear arms that seems to be pretty intensely showing the world that they can do whatever they darn well please, right? Is kind of a dangerous situation.
Judy, I just want to say, I just want to thank you so much. Your experience here is obviously generating so much thought that there's a lot of hands up. So I'm going to go to David next.
Can you unmute, David?
No, go ahead, sweetie.
I don't think I have,
He's still muted.
I don't think I have the capability to do that.
Okay.
Oh, you
You were
almost.
th- you were
You were
there
there.
for a second. Can you unmute again? Can you unmute again? You're still muted. David, you're still muted. Can you fix that?
There you go. You're not.
No, it went back.
Did it again.
Oh, what
How
if
about
we-
There
that?
you go.
Oh my God. Sorry, I'm having so much trouble with this. Well, first of all, I just want to, I was the one who said, what inspired you to go to what amounts to a war zone, and that I personally feel allergic to war zones, and I've never considered visiting Israel because I view it as a war zone. So I salute you and I thank you. It's just very, very impressive and very moving. Mostly, I want to talk about olives and olive trees, but parenthetically, the talk about Israelis buying the land from Palestinians, I couldn't help but thinking about how the Dutch supposedly bought Manhattan for the sum of $10. So, in any case, I'm wondering what the fate of that. Did you say? I think you said 4,000-year-old olive tree was, and it reminded me of a horrific story I heard about a family that was picking olives on their tree, and some settlers came along and chased them away at gunpoint, and the dad went back to get his cell phone, which he forgot, and they shot him dead.
Yeah.
There was an article about the settler movement, a history of it, really, that was on the cover of the New York Times Sunday magazine back in May, I believe. And I saved it. I thought this is something important I should read, and I was afraid to read it. And I just started reading it this morning. And they talked about how the settlers would bulldoze olive groves.
Yes.
Yeah.
So,
what happened to
David,
that?
let me speak to that because I know at the Tent of Nations that several years ago the settlers came and they bulldozed thousands of full growth olive trees, and they also beat up the brothers to the point where they had to have major surgery. So that's just in my personal little realm of experience. But as far as El Wajala goes, that town, yeah, they bulldozed the heck out of that town, which had probably the oldest olive trees in that area, if not in all of Israel. But I'm happy to say that the 4,000-year-old tree still stands, and it is guarded 24/7 by Palestinian people. And it is very hard to get to, and it is well guarded. But the sad thing about that town is it was a beautiful, booming, artsy, small town of beautiful people for many, many generations who were crafters and farmers and did all things olive. And there was a lot of trading that went on there, and it was economically very prosperous place. And Israel came in and built a wall through it. If you watch the movie Where Olive Trees Weep, you will see part of that story in that movie, where this family their homes were demolished, and the wall went right through the middle of their property, so they can't to this day get to the places where they've buried their ancestors.
Wow.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you. I see Linnea, and then we'll get to Clint and then to Brigida. So Linnea?
I have burning questions. One burning question. I'd like to know more about the 15th Intifada, but I can look that up probably.
Well, actually, you can write to Mazen Kumsie, and he will put you on his mailing list, and I think maybe he's already working on or has already posted, but he's been talking a lot about it lately. So he's very accessible. Mazen at kumsie.com. So yeah, he would love to answer that question for you.
Okay, thank you. My burning question is actually about somebody has really confronted me heavily about posting videos from Motaz Azaiza about the devastation in Palestine, because there was so much in the beginning of the war and the middle of the war, there was so much denial, and what the Israelis were doing was so disproportional. So what they were saying was posting stuff like that just feeds this thing called trauma porn. And I've also read through Al Jazeera and Mideast Eye and Haaretz that there are Israelis who get off on this kind of stuff. But it just seems like there's so much ignorance. Have you seen, what do you think about that whole idea of posting things like this being feeding people who celebrate this trauma and this violence?
Yeah, so I think that there are ways of presenting things where you're not focusing on the blood and the gore and the violence. I think electronic intifada, if you've never heard of that group of people, they, I think, have a really balanced, really beautiful way of presenting each week what's going on in Palestine, and they've been doing it for a very long time, and they bring in people who are experts in different areas, and sometimes it's even just hard to listen to what's happened in 1 week, but they don't show a lot of things. They don't, make it emotionally any more traumatic than it is to just hear about how many deaths, hear about how many schools, hear about how many villages, just to hear the truth about it and not to run from it is a really important thing. And there are people who, have very disturbed, and, we've heard of those images of the Israelis that kill people and then wear their clothes and parade around and dance, but that is really perverted and a very small percentage, I would guess, of the population.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Clint.
Thank you for sharing with us and going to the front lines like that. Last week we had people ask, well, what can we do? Well, you're an example of what we can do. And, and as far as there was a big topic there about the land being purchased and taken back. That's not just Palestine. That's right here in the U.S.
Yeah.
That's a single place. It's like we forget that the chairs are the continents, and, we're playing musical chairs. And there's a seat for everyone, but what we're doing is pushing people out of seats when there isn't even a seat there. And it has nothing to do with the land. The land's always going to be there. The problem is the people on it. And so the more we can show unity, the better that we have a chance of starting to realize it's more important that we pay attention to the land than each other. not worrying about the differences in our opinions or the differences in our religions. Those are nothing in comparison with what we are standing on, which we need to take care of.
Yes. And, one of the things that really struck me about the two wars, that the US is funding right now heavily is that we have destroyed the soil in the breadbasket of Europe, Ukraine, and we have destroyed the soil in the Fertile Crescent by using white sulfur, by using cluster bombs, by using all these illegal things. We have done that. And the bombs in Gaza all say made in the USA. And in the first 2 months of the genocide in Gaza, there was more pollution done, more greenhouse gases released in those 2 months just by the bombing alone than in most countries in an entire year. So you can imagine now what that means in terms of pollution. Also, Gaza was a beautiful place with a lot of agriculture and what's called a green cover, which is the healthy soil, which is now 90% gone. And they say it's going to take 15 years at least to just deal with the rubble. I mean, it is atrocious what Israel has done to Gaza. There's no words for it.
Thank you.
Brigitte?
Well, you just touched on what I wanted to say, and that is that last week we talked about what we could do, and I write regularly about not using my tax dollars to bomb other places. But now that we have the World Court opinion, I think it's kind of imperative that we all start writing our government, all our representatives, all our senators, just the White House, everything, just bombard them with letters saying, wait a minute, the World Court has said this is, illegal and there should be reparations. We have no business funding any of this. And I don't want to see a nickel of my money or anybody else's money in the United States going to this. And I think we got to get adamant about it.
I'm with you. And I did not realize the US funded the apartheid roads in Palestine. So there are roads that Palestinian people are not allowed to drive on. There's Israeli roads and there's Palestinian roads. And the Israeli roads are beautiful, super highways. We funded them. There's all these little signs, thank you to the US taxpayers. I mean, swear. Also, thank you, US aid, for these horrible one lane could kill yourself, through the mountains, Palestinian roads that take twice as much, sometimes 3 times as much to get someplace as the apartheid Israeli roads. So that really made me crazy that our taxpayer dollars, which could be going to our roads, are funding separate roads for the apartheid in Palestine. That's just enough to make you nuts.
Just as a side note to the World Court, if I'm not mistaken, the United States is one of the few countries that doesn't recognize the World Court, I thought. Wow. Is that true?
Yes.
Yes, that would be true. Otherwise, we'd be in a big trouble, right? Because right now and in Iraq and every other place that we've illegally done these, invasions and proxy wars, we would be liable to the court, and
Right. And
the
that's why
United
we don't participate. Right.
Maybe, yeah. I mean, I'm just guessing that the United States thinks it's its own reality and doesn't have to participate in the justice of the world, that, we have our own system. And I think that is part of also the stunning awareness that I'm having about our country and how much of our country really isn't living the vision that we all, at least I believed, we were moving towards, a more perfect union, a place where, we hold these truths to be self-evident, right? That we're all created equal, and everyone has the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And I would say in the world, right? And so to call us to a higher standard is really, really important, I think, like you all are saying.
Linnea has her hand up.
Yeah, just real quick. I read an article this morning about the international, not criminal court, the International Justice Court, and about how enforceable it is, because a couple of you were asking about what kind of an effect it'll have and how successful it'll be in reducing the occupation. And basically, this article said that it is just another nugget on the justice scales on behalf of justice and will influence world opinion. And slowly other countries will come around and exert sanctions and other pressures on Israel. It is hoped. That's it.
Yeah.
And thank you so much.
I feel like the World Council, what that is it's a real historic account of what's going on. Not an American historic account of what's going on. It's going to be, we need that. We need some source of real history and tell it actually how it really is and what colonialism did, not from the colonialists.
Yes.
It's a serious indictment, right?
Yeah.
So
And, it was
trying-
very, very clear, these things are illegal. They must stop. Reparations must be made. I was very impressed by the wording of it. And it's, something I think that we can be proud of. We all know that there's enough resources to feed and clothe and shelter everyone on this planet. And that just 3% of what we spend on our military budget would be enough to end world hunger. So we have to continue to believe we can, and to keep fighting for justice.
Well, this is a very vibrant conversation, and Barbara and Lisa are leading the conversation, but I don't think you really got a chance to say anything. So before we stop, I think it would be good that if you did, to make sure that you got out what you had in you. Let's dedicate a moment to you, and if you have a question for Judith.
I have a question. I don't know, Lisa, I'm sure you do too, but can I go first? I just had one question. It's kind of a personal one for you, Judith, that I feel like an experience like you've had. It's if you could maybe speak to your transition back, because that's going to be, I think, could be a difficult one. And kind of what do you see your next steps in relation to the experience that you've had, kind of how you maybe you don't know, but how maybe it has changed you.
I know that I've really been changed by the daily work with rehabilitating animals and being in a place that was so heavily occupied and is so depressingly depleted, to actually live in a place where you don't have enough water every day and you can look across at swimming pools, it had an effect on me. And, I think that I will work towards bringing more people to Palestine, to work really closely with the Tent of Nations and with the Palestine Institute, because I think what they're doing is to try to educate people about, the system of apartheid and the system of occupation, and how people can actually control other people's water, electricity. I mean, they're starving people in Gaza. I mean, as we speak, we could be feeding them. They don't have to starve. It's not like they're using the word famine like it's a natural disaster. It is an Israeli made disaster, and we're letting them do it. Like, that's part of, I think, what I have to really process through. Like, what? Like, are we really going to just continue to let them do this? Do they have more power than the rest of the world? So, I can't really answer your question because I'm still in process, but yeah, to actually like not have enough water when other people have water every day, abundant water every day right there.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for speaking.
Yeah. Well, I have two things. First, I owe you an apology, Judith, because by the time I remembered to send you my email, the last Zoom that we had together, you had already had to leave. It was so late. And I'm like, oh, what a dork. So I will try and get it in there before I leave you, before you leave this time. But something you touched on, just because we all kind of went on a roller coaster here of emotions. And let me just settle us in for a minute. One thing you said about self-care. I want all of you to drink a nice glass of water because you can. And think about somebody in Gaza. When you do that, I'm taking care of myself so that I can take care of my neighbor. And do it that way. And when you eat something today, eat something that's really good for you and that tastes really good, and think, I'm supporting my own system, my own immune system, in order to strengthen me so I can fight the good fight. And if you go there first, you'll have more energy, you'll have a clearer mind, and we all want clear minds right now. They need our clear minds, and they need us to be healthy and to love ourselves and to care about ourselves enough so that we can care about them.
I love that.
I love you all.
I love
and let
that.
me type in my email.
Yes. Thank you, Judith, for empowering us. And let me just, before we stop, everybody, to my knowledge, and I think this is one area where I kind of have some degree of knowledge, in our region, churches are not talking about this like we are talking about this right now. Even the most liberal and progressive of churches are not confident to enter into this conversation. So it's incumbent upon us to keep getting the word out as much as we can. It's important that we keep talking, that we do not forget Gaza, that we do not forget the Palestinian people, that we talk about it to people that we know when we get the opportunity, and not feel like we're doing too much, because the fact is we're not doing enough. And just before we stop, Diane Fox put in chat, and my daughter who's here just let me know that Biden has stepped away from the race for president, and Judith,
He's endorsing Kamala.
and he's endorsing Kamala Harris. Judith, maybe you have a thought on this, because what has been going on is attributable in great, measure to his actions.
Well, I am grateful, that Biden has stepped down, and I just hope that Netanyahu does not come to Washington, D.C., and that we all, do our part in making our thoughts known about his invitation to address the Congress and the Senate. I really don't have anything to say, except that I do believe that the encampments and the ongoing protests and all of our, as much as possible outspokenness on Gaza had an impact on this decision.
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts, David? I'd love to hear them as well.
Well, yeah, but I think maybe for another time.
Okay.
It's just, there's so much. And I, I'm glad that we can even talk about this. If we were larger, I am pretty sure that we would be being surveilled right now. I mean, that's not to say that it's not happening anyway, but I'm just saying that this is a sensitive conversation, that people are losing, their lives, they're losing their jobs, they're losing their careers, they're losing their diplomas, their promotions, their friends, their communities, their monies, their investments. There's a lot being lost right now over this. And it's important, I think, for us to make sure that we are, as Lisa was talking about, when we drink our water and eat our food, that we do it in a way that develops courage in ourselves. But we should go ahead with communion, and Kenichi is going to lead us. Can everybody just take a moment and give...
Can I tell you one more thing?
Okay.
I went to the Orthodox Church today. I didn't realize that I wasn't allowed to have communion, and they turned me down.
Oh man.
I swear to God, it was like a hilarious moment to be in the Church of Jesus Christ in Bethlehem, and for them to speak to me in Arabic and not be able to, speak back, and then for them to ask me if I was Greek Orthodox, tell me I couldn't receive communion.
Religion. Yeah, Catholics do that too. Yep. Well,
Really glad.
Can we say thank you to Judith, everyone? Just, yeah. And
thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Your universal love.
Let's have communion.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Judith. I'm just going to ride on that theme of universal love. I've been thinking, and I know that this needs a lot of unpacking, but I'm just going to say it without unpacking it. So I'm sorry about this. I believe that when Jesus instituted the Lord's Supper, that's what the theme was: universal love, of the divine love of the universe, inviting all to come and be, all are invited, all are included, all are to partake in a vision of the birth of new humanity. And so with that, and as Clint kind of mentioned, that you think about it, the fruit of the vine, and then the bread, these are all coming from the ground. So not just humanity, but also humanity rooted in creation. And so let's partake of that, and let's encourage one another towards, as Hebrew writer said, love and good works. And let's hold on to that hope, even through what seems to be bleak. Let's hold on to that hope to the end. So let's partake the body of Christ broken for us. the blood of Christ shed for us. Amen.
Thank you, Kenichi. And I'll just know, everybody, that we need you to keep Michael in your prayers. He had a health setback this week after experiencing some degree of recovery, and he's pretty miserable now. Roy and Cheryl they have a pre-planned grandparent day. Mark Asman is going to a family reunion in Europe right now, and I'm sure I'm overlooking somebody, but thank you all for being here, for your love, and for